Meet John. John is what some would call a simp. The reason why John is a simp isn't because he's a nice guy, but because he's extremely thirsty. He has no backbone. You will see John in the comment section of every female that was bashing men and their baby daddies, and he will be agreeing with every word they said. It was as if he was a bitter baby mama himself. And on social media, he would thumbs up every woman scandalously dressed that he came across in hopes she noticed him and somehow that would get him a date. Because what you gotta realize is in John's real life, women paid no attention to him. He had no style, no mouthpiece, and he worked a boring job in a cubicle. So social media was John's playground. There, he could be all the things that he wasn't in real life. John's profile picture was him standing in front of a sports car he could never afford. He had a handful of money from his 9 to 5 before he paid his bills to a studio apartment. John, in other words, was a total fraud. Then one day, John was scrolling through Instagram when he noticed a video of a woman he was following twerking. She was in her panties and bra, and one of her friends was pouring champagne all over her chest and butt. John quickly liked the videos and left heart and roses emojis in the comment section. John then watched the video over and over, fantasizing about her. Then he noticed she actually hearted his comment. At this moment, a feeling of excitement came all over John, so he immediately started liking more of her pictures and videos. And it was Friday night, and John was drinking, so with a little bit of that liquid courage, he inboxed her and asked her what her real name was. Because on Instagram, her name was Thot Chocolate. Y'all heard me right. Thot Chocolate. To his surprise, she messaged him back a few minutes later. And then she told him his name was Michelle. She quickly got into her stories, telling him about how she was behind on bills and if he could cash app her $300 because this would help her out and she wouldn't get kicked out of her apartment. At first, John didn't respond right away. So, in her next message, she said, "I'm going through some things right now. So if you can't help me out, I ain't got no time to talk to you." John was put on the spot, but he wanted to impress her. So he asked her what her cash app was and immediately sent her the money. Even though this made him short on his own bills, on his own rent, he didn't care because all he wanted was her. They continued to message back and forth for about a week before she finally decided to meet him in person. She worked at a strip club, and everyone there had known her by her nickname, Thot Chocolate. He waited for her to get off so he could pick her up. Then they went out to get something to eat. Michelle, suggested that they go somewhere classy because she was by far not cheap by any means. John, being more of the beta type, agreed, knowing full well he couldn't afford a high-end restaurant even though he just got paid. But remember, he had spent his last check on giving her $300. When they got there and was seated, John noticed all of her tattoos and piercings. She wore a whole dress, and that turned John on. She then again began to talk about her problems and how the last man she dated was a scrub and had no money, so she had to get rid of him. John, of course, agreed with every word she said, and he added on, a man's full-time job is to please and provide for a woman. But this is when she surprised John. She told him she had 4 kids and 3 different baby daddies. And the only reason she stripped was to save up enough money to buy a car and finish college. She told him her kids lived with her mother. And of course, all of her baby fathers were deadbeats. Now, when most men heard this, they would have ran for the hills. But not John. He was a true simp at heart. The next day, she texted John, "Hey boo." This totally disarmed him. And she said, "Can you cash at me some money for lunch? And I need to get my hair done. And also, can I get a little extra just for some pocket money?" He couldn't tell her no, so he agreed. By now, John's landlord was threatening to kick him out, and his water was already shut off. But still, he wanted to keep up appearances, so he kept giving her whatever she asked for. He even let her borrow his car. She kept it longer than what she was supposed to. Got him fired from his job. That was his only source of income. Now, what Dot Chocolate didn't know was now John didn't have no money, and he just spent all of his time fantasizing about her and how great their life would be together. But Dot Chocolate, Michelle, came across lots of men every night working as a stripper, and taking advantage of weak men was just part of her hustle. So when she found out John was no longer working and was basically about to be homeless, she cut him off and moved on to the next simp. John called her over and over, and he was furious because she was ignoring his phone calls. Then one night, she was getting off work and decided to get a ride home with a new male friend she had just met. When she got to her place, they walked up to her door, and then they walked in. It was dark, so she turned on the light, and behold, John was sitting there on her couch, holding a shotgun. Both Michelle and the guy were stunned. John asked Michelle, "Is this the guy you left me for?" And the guy said, "Hey man, I just gave her a ride home. I didn't know nothing about you." And with no warning, there was a loud bang. He had pulled the trigger. The blast had blown the guy's entire head off. Michelle screamed. Then John grabbed her and told her to shut up or he'd kill her. She quickly then calmed down. You see, Michelle lived in a bad neighborhood, so hearing gunshots was a common thing, so nobody called the police. Michelle sat quietly with tears running down her face and blood on her face and all over her clothes. She asked in a humble voice, "John, why are you doing this?" John laid her head on his lap, rubbed her hair, and said, "I love you so much, and now we can be together." Then a few minutes later, John just became agitated, pushed her off him, and began to yell, saying she cheated on him. Then he walked into the kitchen and came out with a knife. Now Michelle began to cry, saying, "Please don't hurt me, John." But then he walked over to the bloody body of the guy friend that he had already killed and proceeded to cut his privates off. And then he held him up. He held his privates up with blood dripping down his arm and said, "Is this what you wanted?" Now Michelle panicked. She screamed. And then there was a knock at the door and someone saying, "Are you all right? I'm calling the police." Then John froze with a blank stare on his face and said, "Baby, we will always be together." He pointed the gun at her face and pulled the trigger. Then he turned the gun on himself, opened his mouth, and blew his brains out. Well, I guess Michelle learned the hard way. Watch who you take advantage of, because that weak simp might be your worst nightmare.